Welcome to our Q&A session for this course, Teaching Biology, Inspiring Students with Plants in Science. Thank you for joining us on the course. We've had a couple of questions in this time round. We've got some questions about ecology and plant disease, and also about field trips as well. So Bev and I will offer our responses on those. So our first question, which came from Harry, was how would you suggest improving student engagement with ecology topics? And this is especially considering that whilst we're in lockdown in the UK, where there's no practical work can take place. I'm going to start off by answering this one, Harry, saying that there are online resources on the SAPS website where you can do ecology activities online. These were developed to support teachers who are then going to go on and do field work. So to help develop the techniques, to understand the sampling techniques that students would be using, for students to get to grips with those before going out into the field and using those in a real world example. So those are available on the SAPS website. We've got they can be found by searching ecology on the website, but also they're linked from our distance learning resources. So there's a page on there with distance learning resources, and they're really about helping students to prepare for fieldwork. There's also a resource which is on the Linnean Society website, which is ecology using sugar sprinkles. So using hundreds and thousands to model ecological sampling. Is there anything you might want to add on that, Bev?
Well, yes. I mean, I can understand it can be difficult to let your pupils see why quadrats matter. And I always think a really good way of starting that off is to put it into an engaging context. So, for example, if you show them a clip from a wildlife documentary like rainforest destruction or something like that, and they're talking about the numbers of plants that there were and the numbers of plants that have gone, and you can then say, well, how do they know how many plants there were, and how do they know how many plants have gone? And from there, you can lead into the idea of surveying, and you could perhaps find some resources about satellite imaging. And perhaps, there's some really good film clips out there of ecologists, getting themselves up trees to look at the canopy. And you can say, well, obviously we can't use satellites or climb trees, but we can actually use the tools which those facilities have developed from, and we can look at our local environment. So you can use that to grab them, or at least grab their attention. I think the other thing as well is that with lockdown it is hard, but perhaps if you can make a homemade quadrat, perhaps you could go into your garden and learn some of the techniques of sampling and surveying. But why not make your own little documentary? Why not make a video diary or a magazine about your particular patch and how it's changed and why it's mattered? And the last one is I've always found football pitches to be incredibly useful, and especially as one of the schools I taught at, the football pitch was built on rubble and was full of weeds, and there was a big discussion within the school about whether they should relay it because there wasn't really any grass, it was weeds. And the surveying that the sixth form did was actually fed into those meetings about how they should manage the site. So that's directly relevant. So context, relevance, and maybe 15 minutes of fame might be ways to hook your students into this topic.
Thanks, Bev. Thanks very much. I was just thinking actually off the bat, if you've got students who don't have outdoor space, and it's not possible for them to get to other places at the moment, the techniques still apply. You can still sample a living room, and what is found at those techniques can still be done in different, whether that's on the online resources so that I mentioned, or outside, or inside in a different type of space. I think I really like what you said, Bev, about those contexts. You know, why is it important that we know how to do this? I think that's really interesting. Thanks very much. So our second question, which also came from Harry, I think, was about how to link plant disease in better, and to how to teach plant disease again in an engaging way. It does sometimes get tacked onto human and other animal disease, which of course students find or can find much easier to engage with because they feel it's more relevant to them. I'll jump in again to start answering this question, again to promote some more SAPS resources. We do have a collection of plant disease resources, and some of them we've tried where possible to use examples that students can find themselves. So one of the slightly frustrating things about some of the diseases specified on the exam boards in the UK is they're not things that are necessarily very easy to find. So tobacco mosaic virus, for example, is very interesting in terms of its use in plant science and genetic modification, and it's an interesting virus, but your students are unlikely to see it growing somewhere that they would be able to, that they're going to see it actually in real life, for want of a better term. So we've got some resources that do use those curriculum examples and those specification examples, but also touch on examples that students can see for themselves. So one of those, it's a really good example, is violet bramble rust, which grows on the underside of bramble leaves. And that can be found at any time of the year. It looks different at different times of the year, but it can be found pretty much anywhere that brambles are growing. So that could be in a city environment or in the countryside. And when in the lab, you can very easily use a piece of sellotape to pick some of those. It's a fungus that grows on the underside of those leaves, and you can stick the sellotape onto a slide, and you can see the fungus, and students can, have a look at a real example of a plant disease. Obviously, that's tricky whilst most students are not in school. The other one is rose black spot as well, which is quite often found on rose plants wherever they're growing. Usually not so much on older varieties of roses. It tends to be on newer varieties of roses. But there's really examples of that students can see actual examples of plant disease. I think there's tar spot on sycamore as well is in there. So although they're not the examples that are on the specifications, those are, real, students can actually have a real look at some plant disease, and those are some things that they could see in the local environment around them. And then I guess I just thinking in what Bev was saying as well, we're talking about the contexts. We do also have, before I give a great list of contexts, there is a resource we produced for the International Year of Plant Health, which was 2020, rather overshadowed perhaps, but it has a whole set of contexts for plant disease. So it's worth looking for that on the SAPS website as well. Bev, over to you.
Great answer, really. I haven't got a lot more to add, except to say that perhaps if you've just spent quite a lot of time thinking about human health and disease, then a logical step would be to talk about the impact of plant disease on human health. So, and I'm sure you do this already, talking about, for example, historic examples, the potato blight and how that led to widespread famine, and what the impact of that on whole societies, globally, it led to impacts. On the resource that Alex was talking about, for the year of International Year of Plant Health, and there's a whole lot of PowerPoints. It's the bottom one, and it's about bananas, on breeding resistance or trying to acquire resistance to the particular fungi that can affect the clones of bananas, like the Cavendish banana. And in certain parts of the world where bananas are a staple crop, people whose diets depend on them face starvation if these particular fungi, these particular rusts, attack their leaves. So just making that connection between the diseases that humans have and how, you know, starvation can make people more susceptible to disease, and how a failing crop can actually lead to widespread starvation. So that was just my thought.
Thanks very much, Bev. And yeah, just another thought I had while you were saying that is, again, already I'm sure this is something that you're already doing, but thinking about the ways in which plants deal with disease that are different to the ways that animals deal with disease. And there are some various interesting and amazing strategies that plants have that are worth looking into. Right, so our final question. Final question comes to us all the way from Australia, from Eloise, and they asked, when it comes to identifying plants for biology field trips in Australia, do we have any helpful tips or suggestions? So thank you very much for your question, Eloise. Unfortunately, we are a UK-based organisation, so we don't have any specific tips about Australian plants. We do. I'm going to hand over to Bev in a moment to discuss a bit of her experience in leading field trips and taking students on field trips. But you may well already have looked, but we would suggest going to the CSIRO website. They've got various education resources on there, so that's probably the best place to start. I'm sorry we don't have any better specific options for you there, but we're a UK-based organisation, and it's not, unfortunately, not our area of expertise. But Bev, you've got a few tips on leading field trips that I think would be very useful to share.
Thanks, Alex. Yes. Well, really, just to say that if you're going to run a field trip in a particular area, I've always found it useful to make contact with, and if possible, work with the people in that area who have local knowledge. So it might be, if you're going to a nature reserve, it might be the ranger of that reserve, or if it's not that big a reserve, it might be somebody who plays a part in managing the wildlife on that area, because their understanding and knowledge of what's living there will help you and your students to not only recognize these plants, but also remember what they are and how they're living together in groups. So that's always been my approach, really, to find out who's managing the site, or which you'd probably need to do anyway, and to try to enlist their support actually on your field trip itself or in advance, so that when you do your walk over the site for your risk assessments, they're with you and you're risk assessing and also looking out for what's living there. Any kind of educational fieldwork organisation is good. In the UK, we have the Field Studies Council, which you will have an equivalent. And the Field Studies Council produce excellent, very clear resources which help with identification of common plants that you'll find in particular environments, be it, you know, a salt marsh right down to what you might find growing in your lawn. So an equivalent organisation to that might be a good one to go and find their website. So they're my hints. As I say, I'm sorry, I've never done fieldwork in Australia, but I think it doesn't matter where you are. I think wherever you are, working with people with local knowledge is going to help you. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Bev. Yeah, and just to add to that, and just leads really nicely on from what Bev was saying about local knowledge, is that there may well be opportunities to involve Indigenous groups in that local knowledge, knowledge that is held by those people as well, that you could work together with different people on that. So I think that brings us to the end of the Q&A. I don't know if there was anything else that we wanted to bring up this time round. You're always welcome to get in touch with us at SAPS. You can find our contact details on our website. You can sign up to receive our newsletter there, and you can always get in touch with us. We're not in the office at the moment, but the email address is still working. So if you need help troubleshooting practicals, or you've got a plant science question, then we've got a panel of experts we can ask as well. So you're always welcome to do that. And thank you very much for joining us on the course. I hope you found it useful. It's always interesting to read everyone's comments and to learn from you, as well as to guide you through the course. So thanks very much.